This video is an exorcism. As a baby Swiftie, I have so many thoughts on how much I love Taylor Swift's music and how confusing it is to want to conflate that love with a total stranger. So this video is not a permanent record of my never-changing permanent thoughts about Taylor Swift. It is instead an attempt to get all of my confusion out there and hopefully create some catharsis for some of you who are also on the fence. And to be fair, I'm not the only one who can't seem to ignore her. Taylor Swift has broken Elvis Presley's long-held record for most weeks spent at number one on the Billboard album chart as a solo artist, setting the new record of 68 weeks. And that's the moment I thought, shit, nobody has been this big since Elvis Presley. That is huge. Not Dolly Parton, not Celine Dion, not Elton John, not Beyonce, not Harry, not Hermione, Taylor. So I think even if you are not a fan of Taylor Swift, it would be remiss to ignore this phenomenon and how the collective masses are being shaped by the acceptance or the critique of her as an entity, not just as a person, as an entity, as a business. Because not only is it really important, it's also really freaking interesting. The Eras Tour at this point has made her a billionaire, and here on the left, we're supposed to be hating billionaires, right? But we also hate people who hate women for being successful. Sure, it's been a gold rush, but should that mean that she's untouchable? I, for one, refuse to ignore the Swiftie discourse at this point because I think there's a lot to learn from it. And having been on both sides, both non-fan and pretty much a very big fan now, oh no, I feel like I'm bilingual. I feel like I can kind of see both sides of it. But when it comes to this Taylor Swift conundrum, I honestly think, in the great words of Michael Rosen, we can't go under it, we can't go over it, we have to go through it. So today I am going to go through some statements I have entertained believing about Taylor Swift and consider whether I still agree with them or they are in fact downright lies. Are you ready for it? Oh God, here we go. Number one, she is making money for the local economies. There has been lots of rhetoric in the news about how the Eras Tour has brought a lot of wealth to different cities and areas. She gives bonuses to her truck drivers. She's generally doing good for the little people, for the little communities. Now, I've been looking at the stats about your average Swiftie in the US, where a lot of this rhetoric is going on. She hasn't yet, as of recording of this video, landed in Europe, but think that she's about to. You'd think that I'd be able to sense that she had landed on our turf. Does it feel like she's here? It feels like she could be here. But in the US, like, the average Swiftie earns under $50,000 and is spending, like, I think $1,300 per person when they go to the Eras Tour. So this is a huge chunk of a middle class or lower middle class income. They're also mainly millennials who, on average, I don't know if you've been reading about, we're not doing too well economically on average. So I really think whether we measure this as a net positive and attribute it to Taylor Swift is directly linked to whether we believe what wealth building is and what GDP can truly tell us about whether an event is a net positive for a society or a community. I, for one, am very fucking suspicious of that. For example, if a family keeps an elderly person in their home and uses an unpaid amount of time to care for them, that is bad for GDP. That counts negatively for the company. But if they put them in a home, it's scored as a positive for the economy. Can you see that it's not actually showing us what might be good or be bad? It's just showing us whether we're buying things, which isn't necessarily good. I would also argue that the Eras Tour inherently can only go to places that already support huge stadiums, so therefore won't be in communities that are on the lower end of the economic wealth spectrum, and that it's a temporary kind of growth. Like, she's not promising to come back every season or every year. It's kind of like having the circus in town. Those jobs come and they leave. It reminds me of when I was growing up in Coventry. I got to learn how to swim in an Olympic pool, which was really cool because once upon a time the Olympics came to my city. Of course, the city isn't inherently a very wealthy city and wasn't able to keep that pool open, and it's now shut and just this empty, sad space in the middle of the city. Wealth comes, wealth leaves. It's not really a net part of growing opportunities or economic safety in a town or a city. Of course, people are coming and booking hotels and eating fast food, but the way our cities are set up is that most of those dollars are going to be going to chain restaurants and chain hotels, which are all owned by people who are already, like Taylor, billionaires. If keeping local economies alive was a priority for the people organising tours like this, then they would make the tickets cheaper, because these people, as we know, don't have a huge amount of disposable income, presumably have either saved up a lot or are putting that on credit cards, which again is good for the economy but bad for the individual. If the tickets weren't so astronomically expensive, the people attending the Eras tour would be able to spend more in those local economies. So for me, this one doesn't hold up. To me, this is a lie, but of course, you can prove me wrong in the comments below. I would happily be wrong. Number 2, Taylor Swift is a nice person. Now, the discourse around debating what Taylor's true personality traits are is a little unhinged, and actually reminds me a lot of the treatment of Princess Diana, who was known as the people's princess for showing, with respect, I actually do love Diana. That's a different story. Can I truly love her if I never knew? You know what I mean? We're not anti-Diana in this household, but like, she was known as the people's princess because she did the following things. She showed her humanness. She acknowledged the people who liked her. She was gracious. She was grateful. She occasionally used her influence to help certain carefully selected causes, and she just wasn't an asshole. And while I thank her for all of those things, as I thank Taylor for those things, I can't help thinking the bar is low. I think this kind of overpouring of gratitude and adoration for people who are publicly kind comes from a culture where inherently fans are treated as lesser, both by royalty and by pop stars. They're herded, they're emotionally manipulated into hype, they become commodities, and while the Taylor machine might still treat fans like commodities, she, on an individual level, from her public persona, treats them like people. She arranges smaller meetups. She tries to create valuable connections with her fans. She even invites them sometimes to her house for cookies, which I fucking would hope you would do if somebody had made you a billionaire. Yes, I'd make you cookies. Like, look, right. Imagine, right, I've just started dating a guy and I'm telling you about him and I'm like, oh, he's so amazing. He acknowledges me in public. He thanks me for my support. He hints at the presents he's going to give me before he gives them to me. He does also charge me for the presents, but he hints at the presents before he gives them to me. That's sweet. He tells people about the part I played in his success. One time, he even let me come to his house. I am the first to cling to and celebrate those examples of when she has been very gracious and very kind. But there is also an inverse list existing there, which I think is as long, of times she has been absolutely ghastly. What I call her badly done Emma moment.
Badly done, Emma.
When she sued Olivia Rodrigo for a song that literally doesn't sound anything like hers and is, to me, incredibly anti-art. Like, if this lawsuit is valid, then, especially when you're doing it to somebody who has been a fan of you for a long time and writes their own songs and is a lot younger and more vulnerable in the industry than you, like, honestly, if this is a valid lawsuit claim, then I also really need the writers of I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt to be credited on the song Look What You Made Me Do. Just go after this video, just go and listen. Just go and listen. Every time I listen to Look What You Made Me Do, it's just my Roman Empire. I can't stop thinking about it. Suing small Etsy sellers who are her fans and are creating more of a law around her brand. Sending cease and desist. Send me one of them. Send me a cease and desist letter. Bring the big balls, Taylor. Don't hold back. She sent a cease and desist letter to the guy who was tracking her flight and her CO2 emissions from her private jet, which is publicly available information and is genuinely relevant to everybody, since it could, like, I don't know, casually end life on Earth. But we'll get to that. And when thinking about that cons list I'm talking about, where she's kind of more ghastly than she is kind, I think a lot of people say, like, oh, that's not her, that's her business, that's her record label, that's her, and I'm like, I just think it's so inherently sexist, and we can do this as fans of people as well. Like the inbuilt misogyny, it can show up honestly anywhere, and I've learned that because I've been inherently misogynistic and sexist in my time. But I think it's deeply sexist to imply that a woman doesn't have control over her business or her business choices or the lawsuits she gets into. When it's a man, like, you just be like, the man is steering the ship, he's making decisions, and women just, you know, set and forget their business, so they're not really hands-on with it. Like, I think she's even written a song about that. No? So when it comes to the evidence of whether Taylor Swift is a kind person or not, I just have to remain neutral because I literally don't know. All the evidence out there could be twisted either way. Finding original trustworthy sources for any of these stories is a literal nightmare, and therefore debating it at length feels a little bit like redundant. Which leads me on to Taylor is the best of a bad billionaire bunch. Okay, there are 3 Taylor Swifts in this scenario when we think about her, and I think I might have got this framework from the Material Girls podcast. Either I got the idea while listening to it, or they say it in it. So there's the name Taylor Swift, which is the branding we give to the music she writes and produces, PS, with other people. As do all artists, not a problem, still means that she is the main creator of her music, and I think a bit of a musical genius, a poet laureate of our generation, but like, that's the name that we give to it. Some people have a band and call the band name and still have the same amount of participation in the music as she does. Some people don't. It's a choice. That's the choice that she's made. Then there's Taylor Swift, the person, the unknowable, kind or unkind person we were just speaking of, the one who gets her heart broken, who lets fans into her house, who really likes cats, and other neutral statements about herself that I could say about most millennial white women. And then there's Taylor Swift, the business, the one that's pulling in millions and millions, and so many millions it becomes billions of dollars. A, B, and C. B makes A and runs C, but as we can't know B, we can only look to A and C to learn about B. Are you with me so far? I have 2 follow-up questions to this statement before I can truly answer it, and one is she actually a billionaire, or is she just valued as a billionaire because her discography is so lucrative? And the evidence I can find is that she definitely has earned like 500 million from her actual streaming and her actual profits of her music and her tours, which makes up half, right? And there must also be a lot of wealth tied up in all the properties that she has and the private jets that she owns and like all of the investments that she's making in unknown companies that could deal in arms and oil, and we just don't know. So I think that adds up to $1 billion, but I know that when somebody says, oh, this person's a billionaire, it doesn't mean they actually have $1 billion like in their bank account to give out to people. I understand that. So while it's hard to say like, oh, why isn't Taylor Swift just giving away all of her money? And I'm like, I think it's because she doesn't have it because of the wealth management of the rich. It is also like mad to think that it's fine to have that much money, because my second question is, do the best people become billionaires? Can you actually be a good person and become a billionaire? And it reminds me of this tweet I saw, which is, if a monkey hoarded more bananas than it could eat while most of the other monkeys starved, scientists would study that monkey to figure out what the heck was wrong with it. When humans do it, we put them on the cover of Forbes. Or, I don't know, let them win Person of the Year. Margaret H. Willison, who was on the Material Girls episode podcast about Taylor Swift, said, for Taylor, there is no separation between the emotional drive and the capitalist drive. And that is also like so another thing to just think about when I can't sleep at night, just staring at the ceiling like, capitalist drive, emotional drive, what? But that's the problem. She participates in very right-wing behaviours. Property ownership as a wealth strategy is a right-wing behaviour. Yes, she gets her own costumes made by designers by hand and films beautiful videos about them, but the clothes that she wants you to buy and wear at her shows are like mainly very wasteful and very exploitative. There's no evidence that the people that have made these clothes have been treated in any way nicely. And in a fast fashion ecosystem like the one we currently live in, the likelihood that anybody has had fun making those items is very, very low. When it comes to ecological marketing even, which isn't always even like true, but at least it's something, she's well behind a lot of other artists currently in the industry. So like 1975, Coldplay, Billie Eilish, they're all talking about trying to make their shows carbon neutral. They're offsetting things, they're playing around with different ways the music industry can work, and they're talking about it publicly. She's not doing that. She is buying carbon offsets for her private jet, which I think we should note. because I'm deeply skeptical about carbon offsets, but she could not do it. And she is doing, she's over, I think she's paying like twice as much as she should be. So let's just, in the court of public opinion, let's not forget that, even though there is like not very much like peer-reviewed science to back it up. What also blows my mind when I think about this question is that she's not even like the biggest billionaire. Like, she is one of the rare female billionaires, but she's not the biggest and she's not doing the most damage. But is that also just like saying, oh, she's like the nicest of all the dementors I've ever met, or the least hungry zombie in the zombie apocalypse? Like, there are lots of celebrities that have avoided becoming billionaires because they're giving away so much of their money, and she must have on some level just not gone down that route, and I can't escape that. You don't become a billionaire by accident or just from selling a lot of music. There are like consistent choices you make along the way to be that way, and that makes me sad because she seems so nice and so relatable and so funny, and I want to like think, oh, maybe one day I'll be hired as a lyricist for Taylor Swift and we'll become friends and we'll hang out. And maybe if hell freezes over and she gives away all of her money and demotes herself to a multi-millionaire instead, and also I get better at writing lyrics, which again would involve hell double freezing over, which if the private jet thing keeps happening will become impossible for even hell to freeze over, then maybe it would be a thing. But do you know what I mean? Like, I'm acknowledging the fact that these opinions don't make me feel self-righteous or smug or vindicated. They just make me feel a bit sad. So I'm gonna say yes, she is the best of a bad billionaire bunch, but that is not a list you want to be on, and I have to think to end up on that list you have to be at least a little bit bad, at least a little bit delusional. Okay, this one I might get in trouble for. And I'm not a stranger to trouble, and I'm also not a stranger to the cold, hard ground. So you're going to have to be kind to me on this one. I'm still processing my thoughts on it. And if the internet is still a nuanced place where you can put unfinished thoughts, then maybe I'm delusional. But let's try. She should speak up more about issues. I don't know anymore. I don't know if I want to know. On one level, it kind of rubs me the wrong way when people really simplistically say things like, I don't think that pop stars should speak up about politics. That is not their place. It's awkward. Like, let's not demote the clear historical evidence that pop stars have changed courses of history throughout time. Like, it's a big thing. It's a thing. It's part of history that artists speak up about politics, but also that relationships just are politics. When we say the word politics, we're not just talking about voting or feeling awkward around Christmas dinner, talking to your family about the way they vote. We're talking about how you feel about power dynamics and exploitation. What is care? What is fairness? And she is already speaking up about those things with her actions, and some of it doesn't look very good, some of it looks great. The way she treats her truck drivers makes me feel hopeful. The way she treats her garment workers makes me feel awful. And I do think that deeds not words is an important phrase to keep in mind, as heartbreaking as it is. It brings to mind that point in the Miss Americana documentary when her dad's like, you know, I'm the person who bought armoured cars. And I do understand that there are a lot of famous people dancing with their hands tied, and there are security threats and employees' jobs to think about, but I also just think that artists should, in an ideal world, be able to speak out about the issues. Not actually because I think it helps. I don't actually, let's just put that point over there. Not because I think it helps, but because they have human rights, like just like everybody else. We talked about this in my Prince Harry video at length, and if we just force them to become blank personalities for us to project our own beliefs onto them, well, I think that's dehumanizing. I don't know about you. While I think they should be able to speak up about politics, I also, maybe this is a contradiction, I don't think we should listen to them. I think we should let them speak about it, but I don't think we should take on their opinion as any more valid than anybody else's, especially when they have no training or expertise in the topics that they might be addressing. The reason that we I don't know if am I just stating the obvious here? The reason we have democracy is so that we together can decide what the right thing to do is en masse and do that. It's not so that we have opinions dictated down to us by unelected monarchs, i.e. King Charles, i.e. Taylor Swift. I always think about that phrase, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And I wonder if I could also extrapolate that to, it's easier to imagine our musicians becoming politicians than it is to imagine our politicians actually doing their job. Or it's easier to imagine that our celebrities will become experts in diplomacy and political change than it is to imagine the general public actually listening to experts. Or it's easier to imagine Taylor Swift saving us than us saving ourselves. I know how she seems, and I don't doubt that she is that way genuinely on a lot of levels, but perhaps you haven't interacted with a lot of people who disagree with you. I, for one, used to work at a right-wing newspaper. I was around them a lot, and to be honest, most of them are really kind. They're really nice in the day-to-day. They'll ask you how you are. They'll be funny and sweet and thoughtful, and also believe that you owe the world babies, or also believe that you don't have the right to an abortion. It's very confusing, but it's very possible. And when I look at the place and the politics and the context in which Taylor Swift grew up, and the fact that she still says she is a Christian, which, don't worry, I know has a banner of different beliefs and kind of means nothing, but in this context makes me suspicious. It makes me kind of not want to hear her opinion on abortion right now because of the influence that she has, and we don't know what she believes. So I'm walking Clownlelia Street with this one, aren't I? Parts of this video I have scripted, but this actual section that you just watched was me riffing off a concept I was trying to demonstrate, which is that we don't know what most of Taylor Swift's political opinions are. And in the moment, I chose abortion and went on a little thing about that, which I stand by the concept of to try and demonstrate my point. But then when I was watching it back, I was like, I have a feeling that Taylor Swift did actually speak up about abortion. And yeah, it turns out she did. So from this, hold the concept close, but let go of the actual example. Thank you. Forgiveness, please. Please. I think when people wish that Taylor Swift would speak up more often, they're really projecting and assuming that she believes what they do because they like the same thing, cats. They've had similar experiences with sexism and hope and guilt and despair and heartbreak. But that doesn't mean that somebody agrees with you politically. We project our own ideologies onto her visual signifiers, but we honestly don't know. And for me, the most interesting part of the Miss Americana documentary, which I've watched 5 times, by the way, and cried at, like, there but for the grace of God, go I, is the part where she, like, does actually share her opinions on social media about who people should vote for and asking them to register to vote. And it doesn't work. It works to some extent, but it doesn't work. Her chosen candidate doesn't get elected. It ultimately, for her purposes, it failed. And that is something that is both encouraging and perplexing, because when we think about what influence pop stars and famous musicians have, we always think they have more political sway than actually I think they do. Of course it made loads of people register to vote, and of course that was positive, but I honestly thought that it would have had more effect than it did. Like, I was kind of both encouraged and disheartened by how much of a flop it was, to be honest. And I was like, this is really confusing, my idea of fame and influence, and in which context it matters and in which context it don't, because you can get somebody to part with like 300, 500, like thousands of pounds for a ticket for an arena tour where you're so far away from the artist that you just have to believe that they're there on stage. You just have to give blind faith that they're actually there, but you can't get them to vote a certain way or register to vote, or you can't, you know. So anyway, I feel like this lie is kind of a red herring, because I don't think whether she speaks up or not about politics matters as much as we think it does. Probably symbolically it matters to the fans who want to feel like they truly know her and know that she's on their side. But I think we also have to learn to live with the fact that we actually don't know whether inherently strangers are on our side or not, and that her money is actually where the impact lies and the power, and she is already making statements about that. They might not be statements you can quote or statements you can read, but statements they are nonetheless. She is a climate criminal. Okay, I actually, here's another thing I'm about to put on the internet. I actually think it's okay that big people in power and celebrities fly. I know I'm supposed to be a climate person, but also hear me out. Some people, like Taylor Swift, have such a dedicated following and can't replicate themselves all over the globe that wherever she goes, people will fly to see her. So if she doesn't fly to Australia, Australia is flying to her. The more places she tours the Eras tour, the less of a carbon footprint the rest of her fans are doing. So in a work context, when you are actively facing the public and you have a real fan base that is that dedicated to seeing you, I actually think it decreases the carbon footprint of the gigs by people doing more and crossing oceans to do it, because that is the reality of the situation. Private meetings, they can fricking happen on Zoom. If you are Elton John, Rishi Sunak, Dolly Parton, Jay-Z, David Attenborough, people will take a Zoom call from you if you say you can't get there in person. There is a level at which you are so important and so in demand that there is no need for you to move from your sofa. But I think you'll agree with me, it is the private jet use and the frequency and the amount of time that she's flying for, which is very, very low if you look it up. Sometimes she's flying for like 30 minutes. She's flying like, not very many miles. It's wild. Go and look at it. It's too many. That's my scientific measuring. It's too much. In 2022, apparently she took 190 flights, which of course we can all be reminded that she wasn't just flying herself, she was also flying all of her bitch pack friends from the city, which is very nice of her, but also like still her fault. And I don't really think that there's any way that you can claim that talking about her flight use and tracking it is bullying or petty, because peer-reviewed science says that is actually our business. But I did try and look into this and try and put her jet usage into context to see if we're blowing it out of proportion, or on the opposite way, we're not taking it seriously enough. At a low ball from all the estimates that I have found, she is using about 10,000 tons of carbon a year just for her private jet, not for any of her costumes or her entourage or the way she lives or her houses. We're discounting all of that. 10,000 tons of carbon every year for the private jet. To put that into perspective, that is the emissions of around 600 Australians, who are also a high grossing like carbon per person country. Or Tuvalu, that country where the politician delivered the speech from the ocean to demonstrate the fact that his country would be going underwater, like that country. Yet her carbon tons from her jet are higher than that whole country's output, which from what I can find is around 6,600 tons of carbon. However, I don't think we're really thinking about, and why would we? Because it's so, the scale is so unimaginable that it's hard to fit in a human brain, any human brain. We're not thinking about the impact of some of the oil fields and other like bigger carbon emitting projects that governments are signing off and giving the thumbs up to right now. I found out about an Australian one called Middle Arm, and in its lifetime that is going to emit 1.4 billion tons of carbon. Billion, which means that Taylor Swift would have to fly her jet for 140,000 years to emit the same amount of carbon. Can we just roll that back? Absolutely. Taylor Swift would have to fly her jet 140,000 years to emit the same amount of carbon. Rosebank, which is the big hot topic in the UK for the last few years, which is an oil and gas burning project, would produce over 100 million tons of CO2. The pollution from that would be the same as the combined annual CO2 emissions of all 28 low-income countries in the world, including Uganda, Ethiopia, and Mozambique. Does that sound fair to you? Because it sounds like bullshit to me. So, in the context of that, does Taylor Swift's private jet emissions matter? When we compare it to our own, yes, it does. It's kind of rude and irresponsible and kind of annoying. And I wish, as I think most Swifties feel, that she wouldn't do it. In the grand scale of we're fighting the climate crisis, do we get to live or die? It's actually not the most pressing issue to give your anger to, which is wild. And we have to admit that when it's so much easier to hate a face than it is to hate a concept or a plan or a project, because we have human brains and that's like what we respond to. But it's not actually, the data doesn't reflect the extremity of one hate over the other. Is that making any sense? So, does it matter? Does her private jet matter? And I think the answer is, while her voting habits don't have the impact that we expected them to. We know that people are much more likely to cover the lifestyle choices of a celebrity than they are their voting habits. There's actually a study that shows that people fly less when others around them, especially influential figures, fly less. Like, it's a monkey see, monkey do situation. It's definitely like a cultural norm. The researcher Steve Westlake found that of those who know such an individual who has openly said, I want to fly less, they're not necessarily actually flying less, by the way, just saying they want to fly less, around half fly less as a result, and around 3/4 say knowing that person has changed their attitudes. So with the parasocial relationship we all have with Taylor Swift, not exempt, if she were not just to fly a little bit less, but to say she wants to fly less, that could have more impact than actually flying less. Silly? Yes. And I think it's also not just like her professional habits, but her lifestyle habits, especially when you cloak it in the idea of like, oh, she's in love, that's why she's flying loads. It's the lifestyle habits that are really showing a lack of willing. And I think that actually has a bit more of a negative effect than anything. The short journeys and the frequency is what's getting really, really silly. So in conclusion, yeah, when I think about it, I'm not sure if I actually want Taylor Swift to speak up about the problems in the world. And I also don't know if in an ideal world, I want her to use her money to solve things. Why? Because she is unelected and unqualified. Not because she's a woman, not because I don't like her, not because she's blonde, because she's not a politician and she's not a climate expert. Do you know why? Because she's been spending all that time learning how to be the perfect lyricist for our woes, and I love her for that, and I'm glad she spent her time doing that. However, she should not have more money or more clout than governments or whole countries. That's wild. And furthermore, it shouldn't be up to her to police that. The answer to this is Taylor Swift is not a climate criminal, because most of the time, according to the law, that's not a real thing. There is no such thing as a climate criminal in this context. But there should be. And I believe that if there were, if what Taylor Swift was doing was actually illegal, I genuinely think she wouldn't be doing it. This is a woman who didn't even drink till she was 21 because she was worried about getting in trouble. She does it because she is being allowed to do it. And I, for one, would like to spend less time trying to telepathically communicate with someone I don't know to try and get them to act in a way that is based in reality, and more time pushing towards actually making it illegal. I feel like I've been literally talking for about 1,000,000 years, but I guess if you're still here, you're here for the long haul. So let's continue. She uses her personal life for financial gain. I'm actually going to have to err on the side of leave Taylor the fuck alone for this one. I honestly think from the clips that I've seen, while we don't know her, it would be really weird for her to spend all of this time, like spending the literal limited years she has on this earth, only writing songs so that they're consumable and profitable. That would be a very miserable life, and also very counterintuitive, because we know that writing music is cathartic and we know that she has pain in her life. How do we know that? Because she's a freaking human. So to spend time writing things only so that you'll be liked or only so that you'll make loads of money would be a complete waste of her time and resources, because even if she was able to write that good music like it was hoovering or washing the dishes, just another chore to do, it would be a very depressing way to live. And I also like the clips I've seen where she talks about how she does share in her music and she doesn't want to feel bad about sharing in her music, but she also wants to feel like once the songs are sung and out there, they're everybody's and they're all making new memories with those songs and they are no longer about her and her experiences. I think that's a very healthy approach to art. The long extension of that thought process is, of course, Creative Commons. We'll get there, Taylor. Just let us have it. So I would caution you to say, when you aim at the devil, make sure you don't miss. I do think there are a lot of people that use the parasocial relationship as leverage purely for money, but on this scale and in this depth, that would be a wild assumption to make. I also feel like while people love celebrities, they don't often really act like they respect them. And I am honestly genuinely not that interested in her personal life. I feel like every time I think about it too much or I get served, like the algorithm is obsessed with gossip. I don't even think this is humans gossiping. I think the algorithm is gossiping for us. That's the kind of AI effect that really scares me, in that we're not even in control of what we gossip about anymore, because we're not directly talking to humans who have filtered it. We're just getting served short form videos of robotic voices telling me about Travis Kelce and her life with him, and I don't want to know it. It doesn't interest me, and it also doesn't tell me whether she's going to write better music in the future or whether she's a nice person. So I don't, because it can't offer me that information, it's not actually that relevant to me, because I'm not actually her friend and I can't support her. Knowing that information is completely useless. But I also think, as somebody who is a complete micro influencer and has been for like 15 years, I can honestly tell you that the power of the parasocial relationship and the kind of genuine connections that are in there goes both ways. Like, when I meet people who watch my channel, or I go to an event that I've put on and people come, I also feel like I know you a little bit. And I think there is some truth to it, in that we kind of do know each other. Like, if you've read a book by somebody that you then meet, you do know something about them. You don't know them, they're still kind of a stranger, but you do know part of them. And I do think through her music we can know parts of Taylor, and that's why it puts the social in the parasocial. Like, some of it is real. I think that's what's confusing about the rhetoric around parasocial relationships being completely false. But there is a lack of respect that comes along with a parasocial relationship, both from her to us, the fans, and from us to her. And I think making her feel like she can't share her own personal experiences and what she's going through in her work is like anti-art and very annoying, and not something that is attributed to men very often. Okay, my camera battery died, and then my will to live swiftly died after it. Swiftly, get it? So I decided that was a good excuse to change from a lavender haze moment to a bit of a midnight session as we close up the video. The last lie. We can't do anything about her. Should we even be doing anything about her? It reminds me of the clip from the Barbie movie where she's like, they think I'm a fascist, I don't control the railways. Do I think Taylor Swift could be doing more? Absolutely. Do I think it's our place as the fandom to make her do it? No, not really. I don't know if that would be possible. And whatever happens, I think whether you are for her in all her forms and you're against her vilification, or you're against her power and you don't like her music, I think it is natural in this climate, in all senses of the word, to worry about our relationship to Taylor Swift. In fact, I'm encouraged by the amount of worry I see around about our relationship to Taylor Swift. It means that we're conscious, that we're awake, that we're not sleeping our way through this really weird time. And I think that if you are enjoying the output of Taylor Swift, I think it is totally okay for you to keep on enjoying it, and I intend to do the same. If you are suspicious of Taylor Swift, I would also encourage that. Continue to be suspicious, because we need more information. We desperately need to keep examining this. And I do think there is hope. Not hope stemming or generated by Taylor Swift, but hope when we look at this subject in general. It reminds me of one of the concluding thoughts in this absolutely freaking wonderful book, Monsters: A Fan's Dilemma. And she talks about the function of beauty. Beauty is a fragile principle. It looks silly when it's brought up against utility or morality. And yet beauty matters too. We don't make decisions about beauty. Beauty happens to us. And I agree with that. I don't think we ultimately make decisions about what music moves us or what music has an impact on us. And picking the discography of what we consume as souls of beauty based on what our current morality structure is and like the bare bones facts that we can garner from life is a really weird way to live, and not a life I intend to lead. David Hickley is quoted in this book from an interview saying, "So beauty is not the product of communities, it creates communities. Communities of desire, if you wish." And the author goes on to say, "That is another way of saying fandoms. Beauty, our experience of it, rather than our idea of it, is a powerful force." And that made me think about what value I might have garnered from the Eras tour had I got tickets. And I think that I wouldn't be able to see Taylor Swift, for one. She would be so far away from me. But it would be the atmosphere. I genuinely think that might be one of the reasons that people love going, and why they're excited to go, is to meet other Swifties, to be in that huge swelling of human emotion and feel accepted and safe and heard, and to appreciate beauty together. That's so cool, isn't it? And I think I read a study recently about how when you sit in a crowd of people, even if you don't know them, in a theatre, scientists did this study where they realized that people's heartbeats would synchronize like silently without you realizing. And I think that there is something really special about being part of a crowd, and something really special about the Swiftie community that isn't necessarily all because of Taylor. It's something that is created communally when people gather around beauty. And I genuinely think that what Taylor Swift creates is beautiful. She is very, very good at what she does, and that always historically births people gathering, and there isn't a necessity for the person at the middle of that gathering to be perfect or even good. Also, I do think that while it's not our responsibility to change Taylor Swift's mind about politics or the way she spends her money or conducts her life, I do have hope over other celebrities that she would actually listen. She has built a whole career off responding to criticism and listening to it and considering it, whether that's in the rejection of it or the molding and accepting of it. And I think that the more Swifties are creatively and critically vocal in a caring way about the way she acts, she might respond. I don't know, maybe. Like, there is substantial evidence on the internet that she's a massive worrier. She even wrote a whole freaking album about midnights and the things she stays up worrying about. And we can't forget that it keeps her awake, the look on our face the moment we heard the news. It is because I don't know her that I refuse to condemn her. Even if she is a terrible person, the book reads, what do we do about terrible people we love? That question comes with another question nestled inside of it. How awful can we be before people stop loving us? Love is not reliant on judgment, but on a decision to set judgment aside. Love is anarchy. Love is chaos. We don't love the deserving. We love the flawed and imperfect human beings. And I think there is a point to be made there that the way we react to celebrities doing something bad is very different to the way we react to people in our life doing something bad, mainly because we might have an impact on changing the way people behave in our own life because we have a real relationship with them, not just an imagined one. But I also think there's that contradiction in asking people. You can ask somebody not to agree with somebody or to say, I don't think you should copy them, but I don't think you can ask them not to love them and not to love their work and not to love what their work has meant to you in your life. I don't think those two things can automatically be discarded together. In my own life, I do try and look at the sheer volume of money I spend on people who already have a lot of it and how much I pour into smaller artists, and use my time to also look for other people that are doing things that don't have the advantages that Taylor does. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to listen to the Tortured Poets department. I am so ready to receive whatever it is she gives us. I also want to make it weird to gossip about the personal lives of famous people. I don't want to make it wrong or illegal, but I do want to make it weird, like a bit like, why do you want to know who she's sleeping with right now or why she might have dumped the last person? Like, that's a weird thing to want to know. Anyway, I would love to know what you think about the future of the Swiftie populace, if not Taylor herself. In my dreams, you should see the things that we do. Can we harness the weird and mysterious power of the Swiftie fandom for good, for socialism, for sharing, against climate collapse? Everything from friendship bracelets and the whole movement around that Taylor didn't start, is just something that spontaneously erupted, to Let's Go Bitch, to the reciprocity that happens at concerts and events, the attention to detail that they will go in to find Easter eggs and clues, the dedication to a deep dive. Is that not exactly, if harnessed, the kind of energy that would absolutely flip the tables on economic policy and climate policy and all the other things that are broken about this world? And even if we have to do it without her and do it with a broken heart, I don't think it's only the young that can run. I think we can all run from this. And we'll do it, thanks to Taylor, with a bloody good soundtrack. Thank you so much for watching. This video was fun to make, and I had the time to make it without having to arrange or take money from a sponsor because of the Gumption Club. They tip me per video to make sure these videos keep happening. So if you want to be part of a small little cozy community on the internet, the Gumption Club links are below. Now, what does a cowboy like me know about this subject? Probably nothing. I am so open to being persuaded in the comments. Emphasis on persuaded, not abused. So find that balance and find it fast, please. I know that I can make some big enemies from this video, and that's totally fine by me. I do try and take my time with these kinds of opinions and this kind of research, so everything I've said in this video has been at length considered by me, and I don't take it lightly, but I am also overjoyed to be won over by a more intelligent and more empathetic opinion. So do leave those below in the comments. I will read them all. Thank you so much for watching. Frogsnog out.